3 weeks ago, a 67-year-old man walked into my office and said something that made my chest tighten. He looked me straight in the eye and whispered, "Doctor, when I finish, nothing comes out anymore. Am I broken?" His hands were shaking. This man had built houses his entire life, never complained about anything, never showed weakness. But that day I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in my 22 years practicing medicine. Pure fear. And if you're watching this right now because you've noticed the same thing happening to you, you need to hear what I told him. I'm Dr. Natalia Parker, and I need you to understand this clearly. What this man was experiencing has a name. It's called retrograde ejaculation. And before you think, "Great, another complicated medical term I won't understand," let me break this down the way I broke it down for him. Your body is still producing semen. That's not the problem. The problem is where it's going. Instead of coming out the way it should, it's taking a wrong turn. It's going backward into your bladder. Think of it like a highway with two exits, and somehow all the signs got flipped overnight. Now here's what nobody tells you. This man, let's call him Richard, had been living with this for almost 7 months. 7 months of silence, 7 months of fear, 7 months of thinking maybe he was just too old. Maybe this is what happens when you get older. Maybe there's no point in bothering a doctor about it. And that silence, gentlemen, that's what's killing us from the inside. Because while Richard was suffering alone, his body was trying to tell him something important. You're probably wondering why this happens. I'm going to walk you through the 3 main causes I've seen over and over again in my practice, and I promise by the end, you'll understand exactly what's going on in your body. But first, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't about your masculinity. This isn't about being broken. This is about your body adapting to changes, and there are specific fixable reasons this happens. The first cause is something that sounds scary but is actually incredibly common. Many men over 60 need prostate surgery. It's normal. It happens to a lot of us. The thing is, these surgeries, especially the modern laser procedures, can affect the muscles and nerves that control where your semen goes. Remember Richard? Turns out he'd had prostate surgery 8 months before he came to see me. A green laser procedure, one of the advanced ones. Everything went perfectly, he told me. His doctor said he'd be good as new in 3 months, and in many ways he was. He could urinate without problems. He wasn't waking up 5 times a night anymore. Everything was working, except for one thing nobody had clearly warned him about. When I asked Richard if he still felt pleasure, if he still experienced orgasms, he said yes. "Then you're not broken, Richard," I told him. "Your body is working. It's just working differently now." What Richard didn't know is that prostate surgeries, especially laser procedures, can affect something called the internal sphincter of the bladder. Think of it as a small door that normally closes during climax to make sure semen exits where it should. But when that door gets damaged or weakened, the semen takes the path of least resistance. It goes into the bladder. Here's what I want you to hear clearly. This doesn't mean you've lost your manhood. It doesn't mean your intimate life is over. It means your body is functioning in a different way, and there are ways to manage it. But there's something else. Something most men don't realize is happening. The second major cause is medications. Those helpful and sometimes troublesome pills we take as we get older. Let me tell you about another patient, Michael, a 71-year-old man who came to see me about 2 months ago. Michael has been diabetic for 16 years. High blood pressure, elevated cholesterol. Like many of us at a certain age, right? Michael came into my office genuinely upset. "Dr. Parker," he said, "I started taking these pills my cardiologist prescribed, and since then, nothing works right down there." When I reviewed his medication list, everything made sense. He was taking a blood pressure medication called tamsulosin. This drug, which is excellent for helping you urinate better, has a side effect. It relaxes that sphincter I mentioned earlier. But here's where it gets interesting. Michael said, "So I have to stop the medication, doctor? Because without it, I can't even go to the bathroom properly." And this is where the real medical work comes in. It's not about stopping everything and hoping for the best. It's about finding the right balance. I adjusted his dosage, spoke with his cardiologist, tweaked a few things. It wasn't overnight, but within about 3 weeks, Michael started noticing changes. The semen volume was still less than before, but at least there was something, and most importantly, he understood he wasn't defective. He just needed to find the right balance with his medications. There are other medications that can cause this too. Antidepressants, medications for prostate enlargement, some allergy medications. I'm not telling you to stop taking them. What I'm saying is, if you're experiencing this, you need to talk to your doctor about whether there are alternatives or adjustments that can be made, because here's what most men don't realize. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because I'm seeing men from all over dealing with exactly this situation. Now the third cause. This one affects more men than most people realize. Uncontrolled diabetes. Diabetes can damage nerves throughout your entire body, including the nerves that control ejaculation. It's called diabetic neuropathy, and it's far more common than you'd think. Let me tell you about James, a 64-year-old man I met about 6 months ago. James had been diabetic for nearly 20 years, but he never took care of it properly. "Doctor," he told me, "we're stubborn, aren't we? We always think nothing bad will happen to us." James told me it started with just a little less semen. Then it was almost nothing. Then finally, nothing at all. But what worried him most wasn't even that. What worried him most was that he'd also lost sensation in other areas. His feet would go numb frequently. Sometimes he felt tingling in his hands. And during intimacy, he'd also lost considerable sensitivity. When I ran all the tests, I'll be honest, I was concerned. His blood sugar levels were through the roof. His hemoglobin A1C was at 10.5 when it should be below 7. "James," I said, "we don't just need to work on your intimate life. We need to work on controlling your diabetes, because if we don't, this will keep getting worse and you'll have much more serious problems." And here's the hopeful part. James got serious. He started watching his diet carefully, cut out sodas, excessive tortillas, all those snacks we love. He started walking half an hour every day, took his medications religiously. And you know what? Within 3 months, he was seeing changes. He didn't go back to being like he was at 30. I won't lie to you about that. But he did improve significantly. What cases like James's show us is that the male body is more resilient than we think. But it needs us to take care of it, to pay attention to it, to not ignore the signals it's sending us. Now you're probably asking yourself, "Okay, Dr. Parker, I understand why it happens, but what do I do about it? How do I fix this?" And this is where the good news comes, because there are several things that can be done. First and most important, you need to see your doctor. I know many men are too proud that they're embarrassed to talk about these things, but understand something. Your doctor has seen everything. Nothing is going to surprise them. And the sooner you identify the cause, the sooner you can do something about it. When you go to your doctor, they're going to check several things. First, your urine. Did you know that after ejaculating, if you have retrograde ejaculation, your urine will look different? If it's cloudier or milkier than normal, it's because that's where the semen your body produced went. It took the wrong path. It's like a clue telling us what's happening. They'll also review your current medications, do studies of your prostate, your testosterone levels, your blood sugar if you're diabetic. All of this to get the complete picture. And here's something many people don't know. There are medications that can help. There's a medication called imipramine that can help strengthen that sphincter I've been talking about. It doesn't work for everyone, but for some men, it makes a huge difference. There are also other medications like pseudoephedrine that can help in certain cases, but it's not all about medication. Gentlemen, there are exercises you can do. They're called Kegel exercises, and they're not just for women like many people think. These exercises strengthen the pelvic floor muscles, those muscles that control both urination and ejaculation. How do you do them? It's very simple. Next time you're urinating, try to stop the stream midway. Those muscles you use to stop it, those are the ones you need to exercise. The thing is to do it when you're not urinating. You contract those muscles, count to 5, relax, and repeat. Do it 10 times, 3 times a day. It's like going to the gym, but without leaving your house. Richard, that man I told you about at the beginning, started doing these exercises religiously. He called me after about 6 weeks and said, "Dr. Parker, I don't know if it's my imagination, but I think it's improving." And it wasn't his imagination. The muscles were getting stronger, and although he still had retrograde ejaculation, there was improvement. But you know what made the biggest difference in Richard's case? It wasn't just the exercises. It was the communication with his partner. Many men keep this to themselves because they're embarrassed, because they think their wife will think less of them. But let me tell you something I've learned in over 22 years treating couples. Women are much more understanding than you think. When Richard finally talked to his wife, you know what happened? She started crying. But not from sadness or disappointment, from relief. Richard, she told him, I thought you didn't desire me anymore, that you'd found someone younger. All this time, she'd been creating her own stories in her head when the reality was completely different. And this is something I see all the time in my practice. Couples grow distant, not because there's a problem, but because they don't talk about the problem. Intimacy isn't just physical, gentlemen. It's emotional, it's communication, it's connection. And when there's that connection, when there's that open communication, physical problems become much more manageable. Let's also talk about something important. Lifestyle changes. I know you've heard this 1,000 times, but it's true. What you eat, how you move, whether you smoke or drink excessively, all of that affects your sexual health. James, the diabetic man I told you about, said something really profound when he came back months later. He said, Dr. Parker, I used to think eating healthy and exercising was nonsense, but now that I'm doing it, I realize everything is connected. I control my sugar, I feel better, I have more energy, and yes, things improve down there too. And he's right. The body is like an orchestra. When all the instruments are tuned, when the conductor is focused, the music sounds beautiful. But when one instrument is out of tune, when the conductor is distracted, everything sounds bad. Your heart needs to be healthy for blood to flow properly everywhere. Your nerves need to be healthy for signals to transmit correctly. Your hormones need to be balanced for everything to function as it should. And all of that is achieved with good habits: eating well, moving, sleeping enough, managing stress. Speaking of hormones, many men ask me about testosterone. Dr. Parker, do I need testosterone? And the answer is, it depends. Not all men with retrograde ejaculation have low testosterone, but if you do have it low, that can definitely be contributing to the problem. Testosterone can be measured with a simple blood test. If it comes out low, treatments are available. But, and this is important, testosterone isn't a magic pill that will solve everything. It's part of a comprehensive treatment that includes everything else we've been talking about. Now let me tell you something that's almost never mentioned. There are cases where retrograde ejaculation doesn't have a complete cure. And that's okay. Not everything in medicine has a perfect solution. But that doesn't mean your intimate life is over. Michael, the man with the medications, still has retrograde ejaculation. We adjusted his medications as best we could, but we couldn't eliminate it completely without compromising his heart health. And you know what? He learned to live with it. He told me at his last consultation, Doctor, at first it really bothered me, but then I understood that what's important isn't how much comes out. What's important is that I can still enjoy time with my wife, that I still feel pleasure, that I still have that connection with her. And that's what I want you to understand, gentlemen. Masculinity isn't measured by the amount of semen you produce. It's not measured by how long you last. It's not measured by any of those superficial things society has planted in our heads. True masculinity is in how you face problems, in how you take care of yourself and your partner, in how you adapt to the changes life brings. I've seen men who function perfectly physically, but are terrible partners. And I've seen men with all kinds of health problems who are excellent husbands, fathers, friends. Which do you think is more valuable? I want you to know something else. If you're experiencing this, you're not alone. Studies show that between 20 and 30% of men over 60 experience some degree of retrograde ejaculation. That means if you gather 10 guys your age, probably 2 or 3 are going through the same thing you are. But nobody talks about it because we've been taught these things are shameful, that they're taboo topics. Well, enough of that. Enough of keeping silent. Enough of suffering in secret. This is something that can be discussed, that can be treated, that can be managed. And the more men dare to talk about this, the easier it will be for others. I also want you to know that this doesn't affect your fertility in all cases. If you're at an age where you're still thinking about having children, there are options. The semen is still there, it's just taking another route. There are medical procedures that can recover that semen from the bladder for fertility procedures. It's not the ideal situation, obviously, but the option exists. Let me tell you something more about Richard. About 4 months after his first consultation, he came back to see me, but this time he came with his wife, Carol. Both of them looked different, more relaxed, happier. They told me they'd started going to couples therapy, not because they had serious problems, but because they wanted to strengthen their communication. Dr. Parker, Carol told me, I tell all my friends that if their husband is going through something like this, they should talk, they shouldn't be afraid, because intimacy is much more than the physical. It's trust, it's affection, it's being there for each other. And Richard just nodded, holding her hand. That's what I want for you. I want you to have that peace, that tranquility of knowing you're not facing this alone, that there are solutions, that there's support, that there's hope. So, what do you do if you identified with something I said today? First, take a deep breath. It's not the end of the world. Second, make an appointment with your doctor. Bring written notes about when you started noticing changes, what medications you're taking, any other symptoms you've noticed. The more information you have, the better. Third, talk to your partner. I know it's scary, I know it's uncomfortable, but I promise the relief you'll feel after talking is worth every second of discomfort. And fourth, be patient with yourself. Changes won't happen overnight, but with the right treatment, with the correct lifestyle changes, with your partner's support, things can improve tremendously. And if after all this you discover that retrograde ejaculation is going to stay with you, remember what I told you. That doesn't define who you are. It doesn't define your value as a man, as a partner, as a person. What defines you is how you face the challenges life throws at you. Look, I've been doing this for over 22 years. I've seen everything. I've seen men destroyed by things much smaller than this, and I've seen men flourish despite much more serious problems. You know what the difference is? Attitude, the willingness to seek help, the courage to talk about what's happening. Men like Richard, Michael, James, they're not superheroes. They're normal men who decided not to stay silent, who decided to look for solutions instead of resigning themselves. And they've all told me the same thing. I wish I'd come sooner. I wish I hadn't kept this to myself for so long. Don't be like them in that regard. Don't wait months or years to seek help. The sooner you act, the more options you'll have. Medicine advances every day. There are new treatments, new procedures, new research, but none of that will help you if you don't take the first step. And the first step is recognizing there's something to address. It's accepting that you need help. It's understanding that asking for help doesn't make you weak, it makes you smart, it makes you brave. Because it takes more courage to admit something's wrong than to keep pretending everything's fine. If this kind of content helps you, if what we talk about here makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel, because here we discuss what almost nobody explains with clarity. We talk about the things that matter to your health and your life. Don't let fear or shame rob you of years of happiness. Don't let silence destroy your relationship with your partner. Don't let ignorance make you think this is normal and there's nothing to be done. Because there is something to be done. There's always something to be done. And remember this, being 60, 70, 80 years old doesn't mean your intimate life is over. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy your partner anymore. It doesn't mean you've lost your masculinity. What it means is you're in a new stage of your life, a stage that has its own challenges, but also its own rewards. I've seen 80-year-old couples who have a more satisfying intimate life than 30-year-old couples. Why? Because they've learned to communicate, because they know each other deeply, because they understand intimacy goes far beyond the physical. So go ahead, gentlemen, take that first step, make that call, schedule that appointment, talk to your partner, start those exercises, change those habits, do whatever you need to do, but do it because you deserve it. You deserve to feel good. You deserve to have a satisfying, intimate life. You deserve to be happy. Take care of yourself and remember your health comes first, but happiness matters too, and you can have both.